no numbers, there's no pictures, there's no videos, there's no gameplay. I don't like it.
Yo, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope everyone's having a good day so far. Today, Freemers, we're going to get back into Sunrise Stories. Today, I'm going to be going over Burnout. Now, this story is my favorite story out of everything in Sunrise Stories. This is the peak. This is my favorite one. Now, if you're a fan of racing, like if you're a fan of kart racing and demo derby and free roams, this story's for you. This is what this whole story is about. It's a very, very good. It is, again, my favorite one out of all the ones I wrote in here. It's long. It's a longer one because I had, so if you guys know how I write, I did a video on it, on how I write all the lore and stuff, my writing process is. I go off of TCG images, I go off of the FR Wiki, very handy, but there are so many TCG images, like all the trading card stuff, there's so many images of racing and demo derby, cars in general, like mechanics, there's just so many images, and I was like, I have to do a big story. Now, I was thinking of saving this for something else I was going to write, but, like, I can't. Like, this was too big of a story. Like, I had the perfect theme for it. It was just, it happened, bro. It happened, okay? That's how it works. That's how it works. So, this is pretty much about a racer getting back into racing. That's the best way I can describe it. There's not much else to this story other than it's about racing and demo derby, car racing and demo derby. It's pretty good. Yeah, I say we just get into it, man. It's a long one, so we got a long read ahead of us. Let's dive in, shall we? Burnout. Speed, destruction, victory. That's all that mattered to me when I was a driver in Sacred Grove. 1 year ago today, every speedway in Sacred Grove was destroyed by the events of the Glum invasion. So this is where I'm tying in like what happened during the Glum invasion for kart racers and demo derbies, you know, all that stuff. All of them got destroyed. Yeah, the Glum invasion sucked. Yeah, if read Luck of the Draw. That's all I'm saying. If you haven't, why are you here? I'm curious. Go read it. It's good. It's good. It's great. But yeah, so all the tracks got destroyed, and we'll keep going here. When I saw my karts get destroyed, I lost it and nearly lost my life trying to save my career. I lost everything and decided to quit being a driver. Today of all days, my uncle called me and said I was needed in Sanctuary. Didn't say what for, but said it was urgent. I stepped out of my apartment and made my way to get to the directions he gave me over the phone. When I arrived, I was looking at the Wildwood Speedway. It looked completely different, like it had been completely rebuilt from the ground up. I saw my uncle and approached him and then asked, "Poe, what's going on here?" He turned around, gave me a hug, and then said, "Kyle, good to see you, son. About time we get you back out there in the field." I looked at him and asked, "Who rebuilt the speedway?" We walked over to the fence overlooking the whole track, and he said, "Took a little over a year to do it, but myself, the pit crew, and Sanctuary's finest worked hard to give any driver another lap or two in the Grove." So, I don't think these two were related in any shape or form in like lore, because I looked it up and they're really like Poe. I don't even think has his own like FR Wiki page. Kale, I think has one, but I don't think it's like crazy or anything. But I looked at their two pictures. Like, so this is Kale, this is Poe. Tatters is his last name. They don't have the same last name. But I thought it was kind of fitting for them to be related in some way, shape, or form, because I mean, they both got blonde hair, you know. that's pretty much one reason I did that, but also I think there's like, I don't know, looking at the two of them, there's some relation there. So I made it canon, okay? It's canon now. They are related. All right, let's keep going. I frowned and said, "I can't go back to driving, Poe. I lost everything because of that invasion, and I can't just go and lose it all again." He looked at me and said, "Listen, son, you aren't just some driver who lost his keys and forgot how to drive. You're Kale Yardbird." There's his last name. The driver who picks himself back up when he gets pushed to the ground. The driver who didn't quit when his carts were being torn to shreds. Your father made me promise to keep you alive and to set you on the right path, and I intend to do so. I smiled and asked, well, you got a point there, Tatters. We got enough people for a race? Actually, I'm gonna edit this real quick. Don't mind me. Pretty sure there needs to be a comma there. See, little things I need to edit. You know, it's crazy. We got enough people for a race? He looked at the track, thought for a moment, said, oh yeah, from what I heard, it's going to be a couple rookies and mostly drivers you've raced with before. I looked at him and asked, and who might these legends be? He snickered and said, Mustang Alley's one of them, and you don't want to miss seeing your Speedway crush. I blushed for a second and immediately said, come on, Uncle, I do not have a crush on her. He lied and said, oh, of course you don't. We also got that one kid, Bad Luck Barry, they call him. I thought about that name and asked, oh, don't tell me, is he the driver that crashes into everything? He nodded and said, yeah, surprised he wants to race, given the fact that his cart is unpredictable. So, there is, for one thing in Burnout, if there's one thing that's like huge in this story, even though it is long, there are a ton. I squeezed in so many characters because there's so many different kart racers that are like named. There's so many like images of kart racers. This is why it's my favorite, because of how much like there is to do with kart racing in TCG. It's crazy how much art they did for just TCG, or for kart racing and Demo Derby alone in TCG. It's crazy. It's wild. It's insane. But two characters already named, Mustang Alley. That is also I believe it's a hero. It's either a hero or a machine card, but yeah, Mustang Alley is another character. She is a racer. Bad Luck Barry is actually one I made up because there is like, and you'll see it throughout Burnout, but there is a consistent driver constantly crashing into things. It'll show up. But yeah, let's keep going. I looked over at the Speedway and asked, speaking of carts, any chance I've got one to drive? He chuckled and said, I figured you were going to ask. I was hoping to keep it a surprise, but I guess you deserve to see your new ride. We walked over to the kart repair shop to see what the crew had been up to. When we arrived, the cart I laid my eyes upon reminded me of the two carts I had tried to save during the invasion. One cart was gold for racing, the other was purple for demolition. Poe knew what I lost, and he brought it back in a way I couldn't have imagined. It felt like I was living the perfect dream. So like I said, there's a lot of different like images relating to kart racing, and this was one of them. And I thought, I saw the two carts here, and I was like, okay, what if this was like a combo cart? Like, what if he had two, like a cart combined into one? So anyway, I looked at my uncle and said, you brought them back to me. I don't know what to say. He put his hand on my shoulder and said, you don't have to say anything, Kale, but I need you to do one thing for me. I smiled and asked, sure, what do you need me to do? He pointed to the Speedway and said, win. I nodded and said, I will. He smiled and said, good, now let's go meet your pit crew. We made it out to the pit stop near the Speedway and saw the crew working on the cart. Poe approached one of the mechanics and said, hey, Duncan, I'd like you to meet the driver of that cart you boys are working on. He turned, smiled, then shook my hand and said, and this is actually a named character, I believe. I could be wrong. I probably named him myself. Actually, no. I think this is a named character. Dude, it is so wild to me how, like, detailed these TCG cards were. Like, insane that the devs and all the artists and the story writers, they wrote so much into these cards. It is crazy. But let's keep going. Poe, good to see you again. I hope this kid's ready to drive this cart. I looked at him and said, I haven't driven in a year, but it's like riding a bike. You never forget. Duncan looked at Poe and asked, this isn't going to be just any ordinary race, kid. Did anyone tell you what you're jumping headfirst into? I shook my head and said, doesn't matter to me. As long as I'm in the driver's seat, nothing will slow me down. Poe looked at me and said, don't speak too soon, Kale. I was going to save this until the last minute, but Valerian herself wanted to switch things up a bit for this race. I looked at the Speedway and asked, what could she possibly switch up in a kart race? He gestured to a Demo Derby driver on the track and said, Bart Wrecking Crew, they call him. Now, you've never raced with him, but he usually competes in every demolition derby. The switch up Valerian wants is for kart and Demo Derby drivers to compete against one another. She calls it Crash Racing. So I had a hard time coming up with this name, but I thought, like, you know, there's Crash Team Racing, which is a video game. It's based around Crash Bandicoot, etc. But I was trying to come up with a name for what this could have been, and I think Crash Racing kind of fit the bill, if you will. So basically, this whole story is like, you know, they bring back kart racing in a completely new way, and I think that could be like chaotic but also super fun. Like, I mean, there's kind of that feature in kart racing where, you know, you can like stop your opponents while you're racing, but I wanted there to be more of a chaotic sense to it. Like, the stakes are like super high and you can actually crash into carts while you're racing. I thought that I think that'd be super cool, but writing into here was such a cool idea. Just for there to be, like, you know, a new type of racing, I think people would enjoy. So anyway, let's keep going. And again, this is a named character. I believe he's not a hero. I think he's a machine card. I looked back at my card and said, that's why it looks like my racing demo derby card. Poe nodded and asked, you still good to race, kid, regardless of the conditions? I took a long look at the track and said, can't back out now, uncle. I've got a race to win. He smiled and said, attaboy, Duncan, let's go check on that pit crew of yours. We walked out to where the cart was being worked on, and Duncan asked, Big Polly, how's the engine looking? Tip-top shape? He smacked the engine with a wrench and looked at Duncan, then said, hey, sure thing, boss. Cart'll be up and running in no time. And I don't think any of these characters are named. I just gave them names. That's how big this story is. There are so many characters, and they're all great. Anyway, he smiled and said, good to hear. We need this cart to fly when the race starts. He walked over to the back of the cart and asked, Bunsen Nolt, Sarah, how are those tires feeling? They looking checked for our driver? Bunsen looked at the tires on the side and said, and they look good, Chief, but they could be 10 times better. Sarah nodded and said, Chief, these tires gotta be invulnerable before the race starts. Can't have our driver wiping out on the track. Duncan laughed and said, love the enthusiasm, but that would take a lot more time than we have. He walked over to the back of the cart and asked, Alyssa, is the power source secure, or did those dwarves play a fast one on us? She tightened it with a wrench and said, as secure as it's gonna get, Dunk, and trust me, if those dwarves scammed us, I'd know. Duncan looked over at Poe and said, well, everything seems to be in order. Should be able to race no problem. Poe rubbed his chin and asked, why'd you get a power source from a dwarf? Couldn't you have gotten it from one from a Robgoblin? He sighed and said, believe you me, if I had any other option, I would. Most of the Robgoblins have returned to Glimmer Deep, and as untrustworthy as the dwarves are, my hands were tied. I looked at Poe and asked, why can't we trust dwarves? He glanced at me and realized I probably didn't know the details of the invasion, then said, word around the groves that a dwarf started the whole Gloam invasion, so folks are being cautious when it comes to business with dwarves. So we'll keep going into it, but I do want to mention that I believe it was Lineage. It was mentioned that Dark Cheat, like, Edwin Durango, he saw Dark Cheat. He saw the dwarf, like, blowing up a bunch of shops. So, word around the street is, in Burnout, Poe's heard around that a dwarf is the one who started the Gloam invasion. So, I think this is the only time I bring this up to this point. There's one more time where it's brought up again. I just want to point that out because it's a very important thing, because the fact that Dark Cheat started the whole thing ruins the reputation of some of the dwarves. Kind of like gives the dwarves a bad rep, gives them a bad name. So, but yeah, and also another tie-in, I tied in Glimmer Deep here because a lot of the Robgoblins are going back to Glimmer Deep. Again, I will touch on that in another story when we go over it, but yeah, anywho, let's get back into it. I tilted my head and said, that would explain why I haven't seen a lot of dwarves around the Speedway. They usually love working on carts. Poe shrugged and said, that's the way of the world now, kid. However, there's rumors that they're changing how they do things in Sacred Grove, hopefully for the better. I nodded and said, that'd be good. So, you got a racing suit for me to wear? Can't hop in the cart looking like this. Poe laughed and said, "Yeah, let's get you changed. Race doesn't start for a few hours." We walked over to the Speedway lockers and Poe grabbed my suit. He unzipped the bag holding it and held it in his hands and said, "Here it is, in all its purple and gold glory." He handed it to me and my eyes lit up like a flame. Then I said, "Colors match the cart. I think I'm in love." He laughed and said, "Please don't marry the suit or cart, Kale. I'd rather you find someone that isn't an object. Maybe that Pixie Alley would take you up on that kind of offer." I immediately blushed and said, "I haven't seen her since the day that invasion started, so I doubt she'd remember me." He laughed again and said, "I wouldn't be so sure. Maybe chat with her before the race. I'm sure she'll be happy to see you." I shrugged and put on my racing suit, then asked, "How do I look, Uncle?" He made a square using his fingers like he was framing me and said, "You look like you're ready to make history. All right, race is in a few hours. Got some preparation to make with the pit crew." I nodded and said, "I'll keep myself busy then. See you out there, Uncle." He smiled and left me to my devices. I decided to walk around the Speedway to feel all nostalgic about the place. Felt nice just being home for the first time in a while. I was about to keep walking until I saw her. So this is Mustang Alley. This is her actual like art. So yeah, that's pretty much that. Anyway, let's keep going. Mustang Alley, fastest kart racer in Sacred Grove. She was getting her photo taken by photographers, and I actually made that art kind of like canon in a way. Like I want so there's some pieces of art where I'm just like, should I focus on what's happening in the frame of art, or should I just keep going with the story? And sometimes I'll do that. I don't even know how often I do that. I think with culture, the thing that Chagug was holding that was like a piece of paper, I made that kind of canon. If you notice it, let me know, because I do it a bunch. So anyway, she was getting her photo taken by photographers from the Daily Grove. Made sense considering she was the last person to win a race before all the speedways were attacked. As I was about to continue my walk, she waved off the photographers and flew straight over to me. She waved and said, "Well, as I live and breathe, if it isn't Cale Yardbird." I smiled and said, "I'm surprised you remember me, Allie. I've been out of the racing scene for a while." She nodded and said, "I'd never forget a handsome mug like yours, and we've all been out of the racing game. It just took some hope and a little hard work from the community to get back into it." I smiled and nodded, then asked, "Care to take a stroll with me along the speedway?" She smiled and said, I like that." We got halfway around the track, and I had my hands in my suit pocket, and she asked, What have you been up to in the past year?" I looked at her and said, "Since racing stopped, it's been hard. I've been doing odd jobs here and there for Poe, but I've been really depressed not being able to race." She frowned and said, "Same here. Kart racing is in our blood. Sacred Grove wouldn't be the same without it." I nodded and said, "I was shocked to see the Wildwood Speedway rebuilt, and seeing both of my karts destroyed, then brought back in a whole new way. It's like I'm living a dream, Allie." She smiled and said, "You of all people deserve another shot in the driver's seat. I'm happy for you." I blushed and asked, "Did you hear about the new rules for this race?" She nodded and said, "They want to combine demolition derby and car racing. I doubt that'll end well." I shrugged and said, "Well, if Valerian wants to shake things up, so be it. All I want to do is drive again." She nodded and said, "I get that, Cale. We all do. But to me, it sounds like a bad idea." I thought for a moment and said, "Tell you what, if the race goes sideways, if it looks like things are out of control, I will forfeit the race." She looked surprised and asked, "Cale, you don't have to do that. You've been waiting to race. Why throw away that opportunity?" I smiled and said, "I love racing, it's true, but the sport doesn't matter if there aren't people in it to race. I care more about the drivers, like you." She blushed and asked, "You care about me?" I nodded and said, "You're an inspiration to me, Allie. Of course I care about what happens to you." She kissed me on the cheek and said, "All right, I'll take you up on your offer. Then after you win the race, dinner is on me." I was shocked that she did that, but it felt right. So I said, "You'll definitely be the one to win, but that means a lot." She smiled and said, Race is in an hour. I've got to go get ready to drive." I looked at my watch and asked, "Yeah, same here. See you at the finish line?" She smiled and said, "Absolutely." She flew off to her pit stop, and I started making my way back to mine. So the things are finally looking up for me. So yeah, quickly forming a relationship with Allie Mustang. So that's kind of how I wanted to start the story. I feel like there was a strong connection between the two. Like there's a lot of different like characters that I see like pairing together really well. Like Bryce, and whatever that I can't remember the other heroes' names. This is gonna bother me so much. I mean, if I pull up their images, like I'll probably get it. But yeah, there's certain characters in the stories I write that I think pair well together really well, and I think like two racers falling in love. Hey, it's got to happen at some point, right? So let's keep going. I made it back to Poe and he asked, "Why are you blushing?" I tried to hide the fact that I was, but I couldn't. So I said, "Well, you were right about Mustang Alley. Looks like I've got a date after we finish this race." Poe looked at me and said, "Whoa, you hear that, pit crew? My nephew's got himself a girlfriend." I smiled and said, "All right, Uncle, calm it down. We still have a race to win." Poe looked at his watch and said, "Oh, shoot, you're right. Come on, let's get down the starting line." When we arrived, there were 7 carts all ready to race. Looked like this was going to be the toughest race I've ever driven in. The crowd that had shown up for the race was huge in comparison to previous races. Maybe Valerian switching gears was a good idea. So, and there's actually like images of the different speedways, which again, crazy, right? It's hard to believe that there's actually images of each speedway. I'm not even kidding. You can, if you have the files for the artwork, you can look it up. You can like scroll through and you can find all the images of different speedways. It's wild. Anywho, let's keep going. The crew had my cart brought up to the starting line, and I was finally ready to get back in the driver's seat. My heart was racing from the fact that this was my first race back, and I had a dinner date after the race. I was about to get in my cart until a rookie driver stopped me in my tracks and said, "Hey, my name's Alex Driftbrake. Good to meet a cart driver on the track instead of derby drivers we have to share it with." He shook my hand, and I said, "Yeah, it's definitely going to be a weird race with demolition derby mixed in." He laughed and said, "This is actually my first race, so I'm not thrilled about it, but I'll give it my all." So this guy doesn't actually have a name. It's not a named racer, but again, there's a lot of different racers in the art. So I wanted to give them all names. And like, I'll point out ones that actually do have names if they do at all. And if they don't, I'll say I made it up. But anyway, let's keep going. It was easy to tell he was a rookie, the way he looked in his suit and how enthusiastic he was. He looked at my suit and my cart, then asked, "You look like you've seen some action. Have you driven a lot?" I chuckled and said, "Yeah, I used to drive a lot before the speedways were destroyed. My name is Cale Yardbird, by the way. Forgot to introduce myself." He smiled and said, "Must feel like a dream being back then. It's not every day you get to live those." He made a good point. I've been dreaming of racing again every day since the invasion. I looked around and asked, "So, besides you, who else am I racing against?" He thought for a moment and said, "But there's 2 other rookies, I believe. First one is Lila Red Switch," made the name up. "She's a merchant gone derby driver." And by the way, I made up stories for all these racers, so let's keep going. He looked around for the other rookie and said, "Well, that's odd. There was another rookie by the name of Artie Wayfinder, but I don't see his cart." I thought for a moment and asked, "Did he get turned around?" He shrugged and said, "Well, I hope not. He was one of the other kart racers. Looks like it'll just be the 7 of us if he doesn't show up in time." Meanwhile, and this is kind of a flash to where Artie is. Meanwhile, in a deep part of Briarwood, Artie did actually get turned around. It was confounded at the fact that he was officially lost. So I actually do base the art off of where he is, because he is in Briarwood. And he's looking at a map, and I was like, "Oh, he's got to be like lost for the race." You know, I had to play off the art, and I thought that was super smart. Artie pulled out his map and said, "Are you kidding me? Could have sworn the flyer said to go where the chaos is." Artie decided to forfeit the race and take a nap in his cart. Yeah, I thought it was super funny to do that. Just like, get the other racer out of here. Alex continued and said, "Then you got Bad Luck Barry. Besides being kart racer, I don't know too much about him, but I'd steer clear of him if I were you." I nodded and asked, "I already know about Allie and Bert. Who's left on the roster?" He looked at the last cart and said, "That'd be Rip Ringa. From what I hear, he's a tougher derby driver than Bert." I thought for a second and said, "Of course. He wouldn't miss this event for the entire Sacred Grove." Did I spell that right? Sacred? I'm pretty sure that's spelled right. It has to be. Alex looked at me and asked, "I take it you two have history?" I nodded and said, Yeah, surprisingly we do. You wouldn't think that because I race carts and he demolished his carts. But on the day of the invasion, he wrecked both my carts. So, kind of revealing this a little, like in the middle of the story-ish. He's the one who, like, it said that his carts got destroyed. I didn't say how it happened until this point. But Rip Ring is actually the one who demolished his carts. It wasn't like, you know, wasn't some gloam monster, wasn't Dark Cheat, wasn't like the Sky or whatever. It was Rip. So he did it in the midst of all the chaos. Because he saw it as like a cover. I think. I'm pretty sure he saw it as a cover. I would like to think that. I didn't write that in, but I would think he saw it as a cover to do that. So yeah, anyway, Alex gasped and asked, why would he do that? I shrugged and said, jealousy's my best guess, but I couldn't tell you the actual reason. But before the race starts, I'm going to go ask him. Nice meeting you, Alex. I shook his hand again, and he smiled, then said, see you out there, Kale. I walked over to Rip and asked, hey, Ringa, do you have a problem with me? He turned around and smiled, then said, the only problem I got is that you walked over here. I looked at his cart and said, I want to know why you destroyed both my carts. He snickered at Bert and said, you want to find out why I did what I did? Find out the track, Bird. I was about to say something to him until I heard the track speakers turn on. Lou DeFont, usual track announcer for Sacred Grove, looked at the carts and exclaimed, and I think I came up with this name, by the way. I don't know. But I'm going to do my best announcer voice for this, just for you guys, okay? Looked at the carts and exclaimed, racers, demolishers, start your engines and get ready to drive in the first ever, most exciting event in all of Sacred Grove. Citizens, get ready for Crash Racing! The crowd cheered louder than I've ever heard in a race before. As I was about to get in my car, Allie came up to me and kissed me on the cheek again and then said, good luck, handsome. I smiled and Ringo looked over at me, then said, hey, Yardbird, you just put a target on her back. I stared at him and said, whatever issue you have with me, we're solving it on the track. He got in his cart and I got in mine. We started our engines and waited for the go-ahead to start. Lou raised check and finally exclaimed, on your mark, get set, go! All the carts started flying from the starting line. Allie took the lead, Ringa and Bert were behind her, and I was following. Alex was behind me, Lila was following him, and Barry wasn't doing so good in last. I heard Lou over the speakers and he exclaimed, folks, get a look at last place here. It seems Bad Luck Barry has decided to take it easy for his first race back. Wow! So this is... There were so many images with this cart. All of them had to be Bad Luck Barry. Okay, I'm just saying that right now. Had to happen. Okay, there's too many images with this man and him crashing into things. Okay, so for a majority of the story, like, I think at this point, it's gonna all be about Barry. I'm just, because there's so many images of him, I just wanted to put him at, like, some point in the story where he was the center of attention. So, this is it. Let's get into it. Barry's never been one for showing off from what I heard. What he specializes in is being quite the disaster when it comes to kart racing or demolition derby. I was right on Rip's tail and was about to demo right into him until Bert sideswept me with his cart to the side. Lou saw me get hit and exclaimed, oh, that's got a sting, Kale! Yardbird nearly taken out by Wrecking Crew. Let's see if he can recover from that blow, folks. I chuckled, put both my feet on the brake and the gas, then spun around and activated turbo boost. Lou's jaw dropped and exclaimed, folks, did you see that? Just like that, Kale Yardbird is back in the race, right behind the Bad Luck Barry. I had to be careful around him. One mistake, and I turned into debris on the side of the track. So again, this is what Kale's cart kind of looks like, and then, like, there's Bert's cart. And what's funny is, like, it's weird because in each image, the driver is different in that car. But I wanted to make it the same character, so that's what I ended up doing. We're going off of just remember the car. This is Bad Luck Barry. That's all you gotta remember. The car is Bad Luck Barry. Of course, Barry wasn't paying any attention to me, so I had to improvise to get around him. I got my rocket ready, aimed at his back left tire, and let it fly. He felt it, and just like that, his cart was spiraling out of control, enough for me to speed by and catch up to Lila. By the time I caught up with her, she was already trying to use a boost. Before she could, I sideswept her left tire, and she was turned around, struggling to get into the correct direction. Lou caught wind of what was going on and exclaimed, "I can't believe what my eyes are seeing, folks! Lila Red Switch is going the complete opposite direction." And just as he said that, Barry was still unable to regain control of his car, and Lila was driving straight towards him. Lou's eyes widened and he exclaimed, "This race is getting out of control, folks! Bad luck Barry is about to collide into Lila Red Switch. I can't bear to witness this!" And again, there is another image of like two carts collide, and I was like, has to be Barry into Lila. And although I don't think Lila's car is this color, it still works for the situation, you know? Let's continue. Even driving away, I could hear the sound of two carts colliding with one another. I thought I was in the clear until I heard a cart right behind me. Lou looked through the smoke and exclaimed, "What a collision! Folks, it looks like Lila Red Switch is out of the race. Let's get her and the cart out of the track." Well, I don't like racing like this. It's my first race back in a year, and I'm going to give it everything I've got. He continued to look through the smoke and exclaimed, "Folks, I don't believe what I'm seeing. Bad luck Barry is alive and kicking. His cart, on the other hand, isn't looking all that great. Let's see what he does." And again, driver changes again, which is kind of just, it's silly, but it's fine. Don't worry about it. With Barry back on my tail, I had to find a way to shake him and catch up to Rip, Burt, and Allie. I decided to use the last turbo boost I had and speed away from his unlucky cart. Using the boost set a little fire to Barry's crystal. Lou took notice of this and exclaimed, "Folks, I think Bad Luck Barry's cart has been through the ringer. Can't say for certain how long it's got before it gives out." Sure enough, his cart started spiraling out of control, and he drove out of the speedway. Lou's jaw dropped. Drop? Can I spell? No. Hey, it's a good thing I'm catching these things, right? We're reading along, you know? Easy. Let's keep going. Jaw dropped, and he asked, "Folks, where does he think he's going?" Barry drove straight into the Market of Sanctuary and crashed right into a newly built shop. Luckily, no one was inside the building. It is insane. There's so much kart racing art. Is crazy. There was just this image of this dude crashing into a sanctuary building. Like, oh my god. Like, insanity, dude. Crazy. Let's keep going. Barry's cart continued to lose control, and he was driving through the streets of Sanctuary, trying to keep the cart steady away from civilians. Lou exclaimed, "This race is getting out of control, folks. Hopefully Bad Luck Barry can recover from this and get back in the race." He was holding on for dear life, looking for a way out of the markets. He yelled as loud as he could and exclaimed, "Civilians, please make way for my extremely damaged car. It's very dangerous." He finally got out of town and went straight for the Sanctuary Forest instead of the Speedway. Lou saw this and exclaimed, "Folks, this is the most insane race I have ever witnessed. Bad Luck Barry is still outside of the Speedway." He was trying to find his way back into the race when suddenly his cart hit a rock-shaped ramp and flew into a nearby tree. Lou exclaimed, "Folks, Bad Luck Barry has lost his cart and fallen out of it. He could disqualify if he doesn't get back in the cart." So yeah, there's this story is wild, like that I crafted for Barry. It's just, there's so many images where this car is just getting destroyed. This car is included in so much TCG art. It is just wild to me. But yeah, so the cart's in a tree, and there's also a Sentry Giant, which I actually do include. So let's keep going. A local tree soldier by the name of Tree Leaf walked by the cart, and just as it was about to walk away, it decided to turn back to deal with it. Barry looked at the soldier in terror and said, "Leave my cart alone! It didn't do anything bad to you!" Tree Leaf laughed and pulled the cart out of the tree. Barry shed a tear and said, "Please, whatever you do, don't hurt my baby! That cart is everything to me!" It shook its head and took the crystal out of the cart, crushing it in its mahogany hands. Barry let out a cry and said, "You monster! What have you done to my Cindy? Now I'll never race again!" Tree Leaf let out an enormous laugh and started shaking the cart to frustrate Barry to the point of breaking. Dude, I love this story so much. This is my favorite one, and I think you can see why. Like, I put so much enthusiasm into this, and it's just so good. The whole Barry, like I don't remember if I got like stuck on writing this. I think this was actually a pretty easy story to write, but like writing all the Barry stuff, oh my god, it's so easy and good. All right, let's keep going. He couldn't take it anymore, so he ran off and exclaimed, I'm going back home and tell my mama, you dumb tree. Lou shook his head and said, folks, I'm afraid Bad Luck Barry is disqualified from the race. Since he has no card to race, let's take a look at the speedway where the race is just heating up. Lou pulled out a data pad that showed who was still in the race and exclaimed, folks, let's see who's still in this race. Mustang Alley is still in the lead with Rip Ringa following close behind. Alex Driftbrake is holding the third position with Bird Wrecking Crew close on his tail. And last but certainly not least is fan favorite Cale Yardbird in dead last. Let's see if he can make the comeback of the year. I used everything I had against Barry and Lila, so winning this race was a long shot. I got right up behind Bert, but he wouldn't let me pass him. Every time I tried to pass, he'd move to where I was moving. He started to speed up faster than I could and got right up next to Alex, then sideswept his car as hard as he could. I watched as Alex's car went flying. It flipped 10 times over and over until it hit the speedway wall. Lou gasped and exclaimed, Alex Driftbrake is out of the race, but folks, I don't think he's looking too good. Poe and the rest of the pit crew ran over to see if he was okay, but it wasn't looking too good. Poe looked at him and said, come on, kid, wake up. He was unconscious, but breathing. They took him to a medical station. Lou exclaimed, folks, let's hope Alex makes a swift recovery. I couldn't believe what Burr had done. He could have killed Alex and wouldn't have batted an eye. I focused in on his cart and put the pedal to the metal as hard as I could, then sideswept him into a tree. Lou exclaimed, folks, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Cale Yardbird just took out Bird Wrecking Crew. He's climbing the ladder, folks, but can Cale speed into first place? Let's find out. I don't tolerate foul play, and I couldn't let Bird just get away with what he did to Alex. I was finally catching up to Rip and Allie, hoping to at least make second place. Rip noticed I was right on his tail, so he sped up and got right next to Allie's cart. I saw what he was trying to do, same thing as Bert, but before I could try to stop Rip, it happened. Spikes appeared out of the rims of his tires, and he sideswept Allie's cart like it was nothing. Her cart was flung against the wall, but Allie didn't give up that easily. She started driving with two working, But Allie didn't give up that easily. She started driving with two working tires on the right side of her cart. Though her cart was barely mobile, Rip didn't like that she was still racing. He took the crystal out of his engine and threw it, so this thing, the crystal, he threw it at Allie's cart. The crystal hit the cart and exploded. Cart shrapnel flying everywhere and nearly took out a part of the stands where the crowd was. Lou exclaimed angrily, Rip Ringa, you are disqualified from racing indefinitely! Rip smirked and asked, what for? Can a guy take crash racing seriously? Lou looked furious and exclaimed, you're disqualified for using spikes, throwing your own crystal on their driver, and not to mention nearly taking out the crowd of fans! Rip snickered and said, fair enough, old man. Doesn't matter, though. I've already won this race. You just don't know it yet. I was speechless. Seeing what he had done, I didn't know if Allie had made it out of the cart or not before he threw the crystal. I drove as fast as I could to the finish line, then drove straight over the scene. Lou exclaimed, folks, regardless of what has happened today, we do have a winner. Cale Yardbird has crossed the finish line and has won the first ever crash race. The crowd began cheering, but I tuned it out. All that mattered to me was seeing if Allie was alive. Before I could even get to the cart, Poe stopped me. He shook his head and said, Cale, don't. She went with the cart. I didn't want to hear it and tried to move past him, but he said, damn it, Cale, listen to me. She's gone. Ain't nothing you can do about it. Let's go talk to Lou about it. That's a space right there. Do you see that? Do you see this space? I think there's two spaces. Oh my god. That's crazy. Anyway, let's keep going. I took off my helmet and threw it on the ground as hard as I could. So, I actually I teased this. You guys probably won't remember it. It was in a community post on YouTube. I teased this image, and with no context whatsoever. Just an image of a helmet. So now you know what the image is about. So there's context now. So yeah, crash racing went a little bit haywire. Like a lot haywire. It's crazy. Is wild. So basically Bert threw Alex drift brake against a wall, and he survived. But like Rip used spikes and he threw his crystal and it exploded against the car and she died. So Kale was kind of like upset. Like he won the race, but he didn't care. He cared more. Like he honestly, like I almost thought about like writing it to where he didn't finish the race and he just went to Allie. But I feel like it would have hit more if he won the race, but still didn't care. You know? So yeah, kind of a huge like ending to the story. We're not done yet, but still a huge ending to the race. Huge. But let's keep going. The helmet cracked at the top, and I saw Allie's cart in the reflection. So yeah, there are actually like there's a cart right here in the reflection. I thought it would have been cool to tie that into the image. But yeah, let's keep going. I was so frustrated and upset that I forgot what caused all of this to happen. I stormed up before Poe could say another word to me. I ended up going straight to the Sanctuary Hospital because, in my anger, I realized Alex might need a friend when he wakes up. I walked into his room and saw his legs were propped up by hospital equipment and he had a brace around his neck. Also, just to mention, there are no images from this point on. So, it's all just text. I don't like doing that, but I think for this part of the story, I was just like, I'd rather just do it with text because there's important story context here. So, let's keep going. By hospital equipment, he had a brace around his neck. The medic looked at me and asked, I take it you're a friend of Alex? I nodded and said, sort of. I just met him before the race, but I wanted to see how he was doing. He sighed and said, your friend's not looking too good. He'll live, but because of the crash, he may never walk again. Hearing those words come out of his mouth made me froze. I didn't say anything. I just stared at Alex, wondering how I was going to tell him that he would never race again. Because, okay, so there's context to that because Alex is a new racer. So now he can never race again because of what Bert did. So, the medic sighed again and said, I'll leave you two alone. He left and I walked slowly to the chair next to the hospital bed. I sat down, tears started rolling down my eyes. I looked at Alex and thought about Allie, then realized I had suddenly lost everything again. So despite having his carts, having his career back, and everything, he's lost everything again. So this dude, Kale, just goes through it all. Like, this is why it's my favorite story, because it hits you hard. Like, he's lost everything, he got it all back, he lost everything again, just like that in a blink of an eye. It's wild. That's why this is my favorite story, just from a writing perspective. I think I wrote this one really well. So let's keep going. Poe knocked on the door of the room and asked, Kid, can we talk? I shrugged and said, there's nothing to talk about. He shook his head and said, now you know that ain't true. The fact that you cared enough to sit by Alex's side while he recovers says a lot. I stared at Poe and said, he won't be recovering anytime soon. The medic said he won't be able to walk again when he wakes up. Poe froze and then in anger hit the wall as hard as he could. He sighed and said, I'm sorry. Losing 2 racers in one day is unacceptable. And by saying losing 2 racers, he means like Alex can't drive again. Not that he's dead, but just I wanted to explain that in case, that went over someone's head. But yeah. I started tearing up and said, I should have never gotten back in the driver's seat. If I had stayed out of the race, Allie would still be alive and Alex could have become a professional racer. Poe shook his head and said, don't put that blame on yourself, kid. You deserve to race just as like they did. If it's anyone's fault, it's Rip and Bert's. I sighed and said, you don't get it. Rip has some grudge against me. For what for, I don't know. Allie's dead, and Alex can't walk again because I decided to race. He looked at me and asked, so what? Does that mean you're never racing again? I shrugged and said, you know I love racing, but if it means putting others in harm's way, I'll find another career to take on. Just as Poe was about to say something, Rip and Bert stood in the doorway. Rip smirked and looked at Alex as it then said, Bert, you really did a number on the rookie. It's not as bad as what I did to that Mustang chick. I got up out of my chair so fast without even noticing the chair flying back and grabbed Rip by his jacket. I looked at him in anger and yelled, "You take her name out of your mouth, Ringa! You and crew are the reason they'll never race again!" Poe exclaimed, "Kale, let him go!" I pushed him back and did as he asked. Then Rip laughed and said, "Congrats on the win, by the way. It's not every day you win and lose a race at the same time." I sat back down in the chair and asked, "What are you even doing here? Didn't you get banned from racing?" He laughed and said, "Lou can't stop me from racing. I've got a crew willing to help build a new speedway in Black Spore and rebuild the Briarwood Speedway. Got to take Crash Racing for a spin in the darker parts of the Grove." Oh, yes, of course. We have to edit while we're talking about the serious stuff. Of course, yes. There we go. Fixed. I'm so good, dude. In darker parts of the Grove. I rolled my eyes and he said, "The reason I stopped by is because you raced and wanted to know what I have against you. Thought I'd at least leave you with that much." I stood up and asked, "All right, so what's your problem with me?" He pulled out a plaque from his jacket pocket and handed it to me. It read, "Demolisher Ringa." And he said, "That used to mean something to me until you showed up 2 years ago." He leaned against the wall and said, "I was the top dog in Demo Derby. I knew every track layout, how each person drove, and it was the start of a great career. Then you show up out of the blue wanting to try the Derby after you had raced for so long. You crushed every kart, including mine, over and over again." I shrugged and asked, "So? That's how you get somewhere in this industry. Racing season had taken a break, and I wanted to give the Derby a fair shake. Why would that make you hate me?" He sighed and said, "Clearly, you don't realize it, but I'll dumb it down for you. You took that top spot, you got my sponsors, and they let me go. At that point, participating in the Derby wasn't paying the bills. I lost everything because of you." I sighed and said, "That's not true. You only lost everything because you chose to give up. If someone was better than me at racing, I'd push myself to be better." He looked at me and said, "That's you then. Me? I didn't give up. I just realized I could never be better than you. So I decided on a different tactic." He pointed out the window to my cart and said, "The night of the invasion, while all the speeds were being taken out, I used that as an opportunity to destroy both your carts so you could see how I felt when you took Demo Derby away from me." So, like, I forgot that I completely, he used the invasion as a cover. That was the whole shebang. He was like, You took all this away from me, so I'm going to take all of this away from you. So it's kind of like, it's whole full circle. Like, it's just a constant, like, oh, Kale took this from him. He's going to take his carts away from him. And then suddenly Kale is back in the whole racing business. Rip's pissed about it, so he goes and kills someone. Like, it's this whole thing, dude. It's crazy. It's wild. So yeah, let's keep going. I stared at him and asked, "Carts are just things, Ringa, but Allie and Alex, they're people, just like you and me. You think they deserved any of that?" He smirked and said, "I was the first to see you on the speedway today. Saw you talking with that chick and the rookie. Then of all things, I see you with a brand new cart, like nothing had changed. I was furious and knew I couldn't let you be happy after all I had been through." I shook my head and said, "You think I was happy before today? I've been severely depressed for the past year. Today was the first time I'd been happy since the invasion." I threw Poe the keys to my cart and said, "Tell you what, Rip, I'll make you a deal. From this day forward, I vow to no longer race, as long as you promise to leave the people I care about out of it." He looked at me funny and asked, "Are you being serious?" I nodded and said, "After hearing what you had to say, I'm going to look at, yes, of course, editing during the important points." Yes, of course, yes, good. Yes, indeed. I'm going to look at finding a new career. Maybe you should too after today." He laughed and said, "You're funny, you are, Bird, but I accept the deal you're proposing. Bert, let's get out of here. We got business to discuss." They both left and Poe asked, "You're just going to let them go after the confession he just made? And you're seriously done with racing?" I sighed and said, "You know the enforcers in Sacred Grove don't do much, right? And besides, he needs a screw. That's a shot at the FRS enforcers, by the way. I'm kidding. Or am I? Anyway. And besides, he needs this career more than I do. Poe had a shocked look on his face and asked, "What are you going to do for a career then?" I shrugged and said, wherever the road takes me, I suppose. I'll let Lou know that I'm giving back the prize money and the trophy, and let Alex know that I'm sorry. I left the hospital room, and Poe said to himself, "Kid's got guts, I'll give him that. Cares more for the people around him than his own hide." It was hard to believe I gave up kart racing, just like that, without a second thought. I could have just made the biggest mistake of my life, or maybe I made the right choice. I knew from here on out, I was going to change the world for the better, to show that I'm more than just a racer chasing a dream. Dude, that is the, like, I love Luck of the Draw, but, like, as for, like, a short story in Sunrise Stories, this was the best one. There's probably personal stories, if you guys have read this whole thing already, and you're not just watching to watch my, explanation of the whole story, like, this has to be, like, I think it's my personal favorite. It's just that good. So yeah, he quit racing because of all this, like, strife and all this, like, turmoil that they've both gone through. He did it, as a responsible adult. He was like, I'm done. You're going to keep doing this? Then I'm done. Because he literally lost, not the, like, I wouldn't say the love of his life, but, like, someone he was about to go on a date with, that he was going to take out to dinner. And he also lost his new friend that he just met. It's, well, not lost, but, like, Alex can't race anymore. It's just, this is, for me, I think it's a perfectly crafted story. I think it was so good. And I do want to, like, towards the end of this, there's a lot that I want to, like, talk about again, like, write about. Like, I want to keep going with some of these characters. I think that could be super cool. So, yeah, that is Burnout. I think that, for me, is my personal favorite out of all of these Sunrise stories. So, yeah. If you guys enjoyed the story, let me know. If you guys enjoyed the video, thank you for watching. I appreciate it a ton, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!